Good morning, America. Hubert Johnson here with Stephen Mehr, financial advisor.
Good morning.
And glad to have him here. He's going to be really going over retirement strategies today. So that's going to be the focus of today's session. And so we're really excited to have it. There's a lot of news out there about retirement, a lot of changing pictures. So, Steve, you want to give us a quick summary of what you're going to cover today?
Sure. We're going to talk about there's a very large difference between accumulating your assets and distributing your assets, and what those differences are, and why you need to know.
Yeah, that's very important for people to understand. And most people don't understand that difference, which is, yeah.
There are large differences, and you're right. Most people have no idea.
So again, stay tuned. This is going to be very informative. I'm sure I will be learning as well. And we will be right back after this short break.
See you in a bit.
Welcome back, everybody. And again, thank you for watching us here at Taxes Made Easy. So again, we have Stephen Mehr, and I'm going to introduce him real quick, share a little bit of information about who he is. And I think I get this question all the time. How do you know these people? Are they someone you can trust? And again, that's why it's so important to know them and know their history. So Stephen has I'm not going to go through all your middle names here, but he works for Liber Advisors LLC. He's been a financial advisor for 12 years. So he just hasn't just stepped into the business.
Been around the block a few times.
Been around the block. So it looks like you've been in sales before, but a vocal coach. And from my understanding, you enjoy singing.
I do.
So what is it, tenor, or what do you sing?
So I was trained as a Wagnerian tenor. That's the big operatic type tenor. But if I'm singing karaoke or in a choir, I like baritone.
That's impressive. I like to sing myself, but I no formal training here. So you've got wife Tammy and four children.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the ages of your children?
Eldest is 20, youngest is 13. So we're just kind of spread out there.
Yeah, I have a very similar spread. And so hobbies including family, music, theater, reading, movies, eating, martial arts, and his burning desires to be a loving and supportive husband and father, and to help others become self-reliant through financial freedom and help create millionaires and help people retire with confidence. So I think we're really going to focus on that last one.
Yep.
And then something no one knows about you. You're a huge Bruce Lee fan.
I do like Bruce Lee. Be like water, my friends.
Well, why don't you go ahead and take it away? And he has a slideshow for us.
All right. So, as we said in the intro, there's a difference when we're talking about retirement planning. Getting up to retirement for those 20, 30, 40 years, however long it took to plan to get to retirement, you've been in what we call the accumulation phase. And the focus of that conversation was, what are our rates of returns? What are our growth patterns? Future account value projections, average rate of return, etc. Those are all the important topics of conversation during the accumulation phase. However, when we go into retirement, the conversation changes. Now we're in a distribution phase. And the conversation switches quite dramatically. Income generation rather than rate of return, systematic liquidation versus growth, mitigation against losses rather than future account values, etc. These are different topics to consider, different topics to think about, and a lot of people don't know this because and when we start talking about distribution phase type topics, a lot of people are like, hold on, for 40 years I've been doing this and it's worked, and now you're telling me that we're changing the rules? Yeah, kind of. You got to realize what got you here isn't going to get you through tomorrow. They're very, very different. They require different mindset, different separate set of tools in order to be successful. The metaphor we like to use is climbing Mount Everest. People think we hear people talk about I'm training to climb Mount Everest. I'm getting to the top of Mount Everest. I've got a goal to get to the top of Mount Everest. They're always talking about climbing, and they're always talking about getting to the top, and they're always talking about looking at the summit. Let me ask you this. Is the goal of climbing Mount Everest just to get to the top? It's kind of a trick question. What do you think?
No, it should be about the journey.
Okay, good answer. I would say not only is it important to get up the mountain, but then it's also important to get back down the mountain safely, which would fit within your answer. Not quite what I was looking for, but that's good. Let's get down the mountain safely. And if you can look this up, the mortality rates of going down the mountain are actually higher than going up the mountain. They're about you're 3 to 4 times more likely to die going down Mount Everest than you are climbing it. Crazy, isn't it?
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's legit. The numbers are out there. And we see this this is a fantastic metaphor for retirement. Everybody's planning for retirement, saving for retirement, they have goals for retirement, and then they get to retirement. And if you don't have a good plan for the other side of retirement, you could be in just as bumpy a ride and just as dangerous a ride as somebody who's only planned and trained to climb Mount Everest, but didn't have a clear plan or have the correct set of tools to get down Mount Everest.
Now, does this apply for just people with assets? Because I just spoke to someone earlier this week, had over $1 million, went through the crash, lost pretty much all of it, and didn't know how to manage their money. And once they had it,
Okay. So yeah, managing your money during the accumulation phase and managing it during a distribution phase are two different things. So yeah, we're talking about people who have assets, and or who have plans to get assets, plans to save for assets, etc. Yeah,
I can't
that
tell
help.
you how many people have saved up all kinds of money, and then they make some decisions, some urgent needs come up, and then it can go just as fast if you're not careful.
Oh, it can go ridiculously fast. Your nest egg, your retirement nest egg can be gone just like that if you're not careful. And just exactly that's why Mount Everest is such a perfect metaphor. People lose their lives just like that. You can lose your nest egg just like that. If you're not careful, if you don't have a proper plan in place, if you're not yeah. That's what all this is about. So, let's go over a brief history lesson of what retirement planning has been, where it is now. So, this will make a sense why I'm going into this in a minute here. So, pre 1980s, we had pension plans. They were the main form of retirement income planning. Was you got the gold watch and you got a pension. That was a percentage of your income. The employers, all they had to do was make certain that the employee pension fund was well funded and that everything was going well there. The employees part, they just had to live within the budget that the pension allowed. That was all they had to worry about. And then financial advisors, if there was one on the scene, the only thing they really worried about was accumulating assets, making the assets continue to grow. They weren't worried about income generation because the pension took care of the income. And usually back then, it was only the affluents or the rich who had financial professionals on their team. It wasn't an everyday thing. So financial advisors then were just let's accumulate and let's grow, and that was our focus. They didn't have to worry about income. Then the 1980s ish, 78 to 82, that era there, 401ks come on the scene. And the landscape changes dramatically.
Why was that? Was that due to the stagflation going on at that time?
Yeah, Congress just okay. So it's mostly multifaceted. Some people are saying the employer is keeping all this money in this pension fund, and the employees are getting the short end of the stick on this. There were some tax conversations that were happening. It's kind of a big conversation. I don't know how
we don't have to
much
dive into it.
deeper.
I was just curious.
There were a lot of reasons why, but Congress, in their infinite wisdom, said we're gonna we're not going to do away with pensions, but we're going to make them expensive. We're going to make them open to a lot of litigation. There's going to be a ton of red tape. They're going to be difficult and expensive to run. But as an alternative, here's a 401k, which I'm sure you understand that 401k is the IRC 401k. That's where that comes from. The employer, well, that they had to do was offer it, and then they had the choice to match funds if they wanted to. But the employer basically just said, hey, we are out of your retirement plan. We are washing our hands of you. It is all on you now. We're done. And so now it became incumbent on the employee to plan for their own retirement. Now, there are pros and cons to this, or there are pros and cons to everything. I'm sure there is. Maybe I shouldn't say there isn't, but generally speaking, things are rarely absolute black or white. There's reasons to like and dislike nearly everything, and the 401k is no exception. With the 401k, I lost you there. Are we still
I'm
on?
still here. Yeah, we're still on.
There we go. With the 401k, there's a lot more flexibility. If you have a really good year and you want to invest more, you can pop more into it. If you have a really lean year, you don't have to put as much into it. There's a lot more flexibility there. Also, in retirement, if you don't need as much money, you can take out less. If you need more, then you can take out more. There was a lot of flexibility. Those are, you are in charge of your destiny. That's a pro. However, that's also a con, because overnight, everybody had to learn how to become an investor. And investing is a skill set, just like any other skill set. I know how to change my oil, but I still take it to a mechanic. Playing basketball, I know how to play basketball, but I'm not in the NBA. These are examples of skill sets that we can have and we can develop, but not everybody wants them, and not everybody wants to take the time to develop them. And so the number of financial advisors on the scene, the financial professional world, exploded. There were a lot of financial advisors all of a sudden because the everyday man needed financial advice. It wasn't just the affluent and the wealthy. The issue with this idea is that all the financial advisors previous to this, they were focusing on growing assets, accumulating and growing assets. They weren't worried about income. So all of a sudden, now we've got to figure out, okay, how do I make certain that my client has enough money to live to survive? How do they have income without running out of money?
Yeah.
I mean, there were some that talked about that, obviously, but it wasn't widespread. And so that's the situation that we're running into. So I think now is a good time to, we'll take a break here. And when we come back, we'll talk about, okay, so what do financial advisors do to try to figure out how are we going to solve this riddle that we're suddenly faced with?
And I see plenty of times where people will access their 401ks in an emergency. And sometimes it is a real emergency.
Right.
But then you destroy your nest egg. And I see people get scammed out of it too, and it creates huge tax problems and headaches. So we're going to be hitting this break in about 10 seconds. But when we come back again, Stephen Mehr will have the floor again. He's got a lot to share with us, and we'll continue in just a few moments. So,
all right, see you there.
See you there. Welcome back, everybody. And we're here with Stephen Mehr, financial advisor, talking about how to not only plan for retirement, but how to use your retirement and not fall into some common pitfalls, and make sure you're not tripping and falling all the way down Mount Everest on the way down.
Yeah, we'd rather avoid that if we can. So before the break, we were talking about some of the history of retirement income planning. And the reason why is because in order for you to have an understanding of why we're at where we're at right now and what the issues that we're facing is, you really got to understand what brought all this together. And we talked about pensions and 401ks, and now we're talking about, okay, so how in the world do financial advisors create income from this pool of money for one individual? Because remember, you're doing it for one individual, not for thousands of individuals. If you're doing it for thousands of individuals, you can use statistical probability to calculate your successes. But with one individual, you get one shot, and either you hit a home run or you strike out. And that's the issue. So, how did they figure out what in the world we're going to do? Well, we started with what's called the constant rate of return theory. That's my name for it. There's no official title for it, but this is what I call it. And the idea is something similar. You probably, if you listen to talking heads that give advice on the radio, you're probably hearing something similar to this. The market averages about 12%. Inflation averages about 4%. So if we take the inflation off of our growth, that's going to leave us with about 8%. So we should be able to withdraw 8% and be close to where we started. We may not be to the penny, but we're going to be somewhat close, right?
Okay.
That's the constant rate of return theory, and it sounds commonsensical. 12 minus 4 is 8, and so if I take out 8, that would be 0. So there's no growth. I'm about where I started. Numbers make sense, except that it failed catastrophically. It failed horrendously because it doesn't take market volatility into account at all. In fact, when we put volatility into the equation and we take a look at it, that's what a Monte Carlo does. It takes volatility and spits out probability of success. This scenario has about a 5% success rate. So your 5%, your chances of passing away with 1 penny or more are 5%. Would you feel comfortable if that was
No,
Yeah.
of course not.
Me neither. So then the 4% rule came onto the scene. This is a very, very popular rule. To this day, it's still used very, very widely. It was created in 1994 by William Benjamin. He was a certified financial planner. And he wrote the 4% rule. Now, the idea, I won't go into all the details and bore you. Basically, it's just 4% is bulletproof, is what he was trying to say. If you do a 4% rule, 4% withdrawal, it doesn't matter how big or wide the swings of the market are. It doesn't matter at all. You should be fine in 100% of the situations. Well, we've lived with the 4% rule now for about 30 years. And we're finding out it's not quite as bulletproof as we were led to believe. There are a couple of issues. First issue is that low of a withdrawal rate. So hold on, let's figure this out. I have $1 million, and you're telling me that I have to live on $40,000 a year? I'm a millionaire living on $40,000 a year? That didn't go over very well. To which the financial advisor then gets the pleasure of saying, no, you don't get to live on 4% a year because this was in a 401k. So that meant you put the money in before you pay taxes. You got the tax deduction. So now when you withdraw those funds from the 401k, taxes are owed. So no, it's not really a 4% withdrawal. You're not living on 40,000. You're living on closer to 32, 35,000. So that made it even worse. But not only that, we find that it's not bulletproof either. When we run the Monte Carlos, depending on which funds we use, the success rate is about 50%. Now, let's give credit where credit is due. 50% success rate is way better than 5% success rate. However, I mean, if I were on a plane to Honolulu and the pilot said, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to embark on our flight to Honolulu. We've got about a 50% chance of making it there safely. So buckle up and enjoy your flight. I wouldn't want to be on that plane, would you?
This isn't just a flight. This is their retirement. Are they going to have a comfortable retirement or be scraping by, which is no fun?
Yeah, and you get one shot. So yeah, this is crazy. So what is going on? I mean, financial advisors are the professionals. Why can't we figure this out? What is happening here? Well, a lot of it is due to the fact that they're using 40-year-old advice. And things change over time. You think of a car 40 years ago to a car today. You think of a computer 40 years ago to a computer today. They're not the same. They're similar, but they're not the same. Same thing in the world of finance. And if you're using 40-year-olds' thinking patterns of 40-year-old advice, you're going to be behind the times compared to what we can do today. So what have we learned? There are actually a lot of variables working against people when we're talking about income planning. Again, we're making a distinction. This is specific to income, not growth. They are two different topics. We're only going to go over 3 today. And at the end of this broadcast, if anybody wants some additional information, I actually have a free giveaway. I have a guidebook, a retirement guidebook that if anybody reaches out to me, I will email them an electronic copy for free where we go over this topic in a little bit more detail and go over a few other things to know and to be aware of. But we're only going to go over 3 in the interest of time. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. So the first one is calculating annualized averages is problem number 1. We talk about annual average of 12% growth, annual inflation of 4%. So we should be able to average 8% withdraw. There's problems. The moment you start hearing a financial advisor talk about averages, that should be throwing red flags. We'll talk about why. Sequence of returns risk. That's what it exactly sounds like. The risk of our returns in the sequence of those returns. Are we going into retirement in an up market or a down market? That's something to take into account. And then the effects of market volatility on a liquidating asset. How volatile are the funds you're using, and what does that mean to you? So let's go over those real quick. Calculating annualized averages. I love giving this thought exercise to people. You'd be surprised how many people. Well, let's just go into it. We got $1,000 and we lose 10%. Where are we at now? 900, right? Very good. Now our account, the stock market gains 10%. Now where are we at?
99.
990.
Oh, 990.
Yeah, 990. You're one of the few people to get that right. Almost everybody, when I say, well, your account went down 10% and your account went up 10%, where are you at? Everybody thinks, well, negative 10 plus 10 is 0, so my account's back up to 1,000. Nope, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
That is not how that works. And you can flip the order of operations. If you add 10% first and then subtract 10%, you're still at the exact same number. Doesn't matter. And if you let's take the ridiculous, and this happened in 2008 to some people. They lost 50% of their account. Yeah, a lot of people. They lost 50% on their account. You need to have a 100% return on your account just to break even. You're down 50, you're up 100. Now, if you do the math there, negative 50 plus 100 is positive 50. Divide that by 2 is 25. That shows an average return of 25%. But did my account grow by 25% over a 2-year period? No, sir, it did not. So you cannot rely on averages. And every single time you hear somebody in the financial world talk about averages, beware. Because losses are always a heavier hit than gains. The market always has to overcompensate just to get back to 0, and then we're in profit mode. Make sense?
That's very interesting. So when they talk about the markets being up so much, when we have a downturn, it actually has a much bigger impact than what the percentages that they're talking about.
Exactly. And so when they say, well, the market is averaging 12%, so you should be able to withdraw 8%. You're starting to shake your head. Notice it's when you're in the distribution phase, it's a double whammy because you have to account for withdrawals. Withdrawals from an accounting standpoint are losses on the account. So not only do you have to take into account the inherent withdrawals of the stock market itself, you have to take into account how much money you're pulling out, which is also a loss. And so the market has to overcompensate for its own inherent losses, and it has to overcompensate for your withdrawal situation. And the market just isn't that strong to do it all on its own, especially using 40-year-old techniques. It can't overcompensate for both situations. So that's problem number 1. Using averages to say, well, if the market averages this, then I should be able to withdraw less than that on the average and I'll be fine. No.
Now, I'm somewhat following you, but can we put that into plain English for the average consumer out there?
So let's go back to this. For example, let's say that the market is down 10%,
Hmm.
right? And let's use the 4% rule. Let's say that we're going to use the 4% rule. So the market experiences a 10% loss and you take out 4% yourself.
It's negative 14%.
Negative 14%. Now, if we're talking just the negative 10, the account has to grow by 11 just to break even. But when we go down to negative 14, now the account has to give us a return of 16, 17, or 18. Again, just to break even. It has to overcompensate for whatever we take out of it or whatever losses it incurs. So thinking if going into retirement saying over the past 40 years my account has averaged 12%. I can show you on the chart, I can do the calculations, I can put it in an Excel spreadsheet, I can calculate it to the penny, I can calculate it to 8 decimal points in the precision. I know that my account averages 12%. And so I should be able to withdraw 8 and it will be fine. It's like, well, it may be averaging 12%, but it's not getting a consistent 12%. Some years you're going to be negatives, and then you're going to take withdrawals.
Yeah,
What's going to that 12% isn't a 12% anymore.
right.
That's the danger that we're having. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. Thanks for good clarifying there. Thanks for that.
So would you look for something like a 12% year over year, or if it's in 12 months, or just get rid of the word averages, or do they just not talk like that?
Well, when let's put a pin in that and come back to that. That's
Okay.
a great question. Let's keep going forward, and I'll come back to that. Okay. So, sequence of returns. Like I said, this is the sequence of the returns we're getting. So here we're going to take somebody. We have somebody who is investing in an up market. Can you see my cursor there?
I can see your cursor.
Okay. So we have an up market and then we have a down market. And if you look at these two columns of returns, they're the exact same numbers. There's no difference in numbers. They're just in opposite orders. So here we're starting positive 5, 28, 23, and then we have a negative 5.
Okay.
If you look down here and we go opposite, positive 5, 28, 22, negative 5.
Right.
Here we're starting in a down year, negative 25, negative 14, negative 10, positive 16. Over here, it's the exact opposite. Negative 25, negative 14, negative 10, positive 16. These are the exact same numbers in opposite order.
Okay.
Follow?
Okay.
The average on all these is 7.32%.
Okay.
If you average out all the growth and all the downside, it's 7.32%. Now, we're going to start with $1 million, and if you notice, both sides are at $4.28 million. They grow the exact same amounts because while we're in accumulation, recall back to the very beginning of our conversation, average rates of returns and growth patterns, that is important for accumulation. And it doesn't matter if we're investing in an up market or a down market, as long as our averages are positive, we're going to be fine.
Okay.
We're going to have the exact same outcome if we have the exact same returns, no matter what order they're in. But when we begin taking withdrawals, notice what happens. Oh, there, I circled that. Same average, same endpoint. The order didn't matter at all. But now we're going to take out 5% every year. So we're starting with $1 million. We're taking out 50,000. If we do this and we start in an up year, we notice that at the end here, this person has 2.5 million in his account. Very happy. But if we start in a down year, this person is flat broke by age 83. Why?
Well, if they have $1 million.
What happened? Well, we're keeping both sides equal. They're both starting with $1 million for illustration purposes. They both have $1 million in their account, and they're both withdrawing the exact same amount. The only difference is one started withdrawing in an up market, one started withdrawing in a down market. That's the only difference.
Right. Well, the difference is clearly you have to climb more every time you have an increase in withdrawal. So instead of reducing, if you take out 5%, and you take out 50,000, there's almost no difference. That first year goes from $1 million and you withdraw 50,000, still $1 million. But in a down market, a severely down market, now you only have 70% of your original investment. And again, that's almost very, very difficult to recover from.
Right? I mean, what happened here is by the time this person was age 68, their account
Half
was
was gone.
under it was over half gone. So the market needed to return over 100% just to break even. Market's not that strong. It's not going to give us those kind of returns.
And you can't plan for this because you can't tell what the market's going to do
You
in
have
future
no
years.
idea if you're going in an up market or a down market. Yep, exactly. Isn't that lovely?
Ah,
Now,
okay.
here's the next fun part of that conversation, because then you're like, well, but there are market cycles, and we can look at historical data, and we can figure out where the ups and downs are. Get this. Here's 1933. We had the Glass-Steagall Act. This came about because of the Great Depression. This enacted a lot of protections for the everyday person. Then in 1999, we have the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, it didn't totally eviscerate the Glass-Steagall, but it changed a lot of the rules in a severe way. From 1933 to 1999, we only had 6 major market downturns. 6 in 65 years. Okay? But from 1999, if we average that out, that's approximately 1 downturn every 10.83 years. So you can, with some degree of certainty, make certain that you're going in on an up market. But since 1999, we've had 11 major downturns in the past 24 years. Are you noticing an issue here? 6 in 65 years versus 11 24 years. That becomes 1 downturn every 2.18 years. So now the chances of us making certain that we're retiring in an up market, not a down market, have reduced dramatically. Doesn't that just give you the warm fuzzies?
Yeah, my mind goes, well, what about the Great Depression that really started in 29, really didn't end until World War II?
Yeah.
I mean, that's 10 years roughly of a depression. But a downturn doesn't always last 1 year. They can last. I mean, we saw in 2011 or 2008 how long did it take us to really recover from that?
Oh, well, I mean, go further back. If you go to the .com bubble burst,
Yeah,
at the turn of the millennia, in the world of finance, we call the 2000s the lost decade. If you had $100,000 at 2000, you didn't have $100,000 again until 2013. That's when you finally broke even. It took 13 years to break even from the downfall of the .com bubble burst, and then we were almost at break even when 2008 hit. We were just shy of break even when 2008 hit, and then we hit another down point, and it took us 5 years to get back to zero. You had 13 years where your account grew nothing.
Wow.
Now, your account could have grown if you did dollar cost averaging. That's another topic, and we're not going to go into that right now. I actually go into that in the guidebook because it's very, very important for retirement income planning, but we don't have time to go into it right now.
So we're coming up on another break, so this is perfect timing, and we'll hit this right after the break in 2 seconds.
Perfect.
Welcome back, everybody. And again, thank you for sticking with us here at Taxes Made Easy with Stephen Mehr. And we're going to wrap this up with him and take it away.
All right. So we just talked about being careful of how you talk about averages, and then we talked about the sequence of returns risk and how that affects things, and how crazy the market's been ever since 99, and the missing decade. We talked about that. Now let's talk about the last bit we're going to talk about as far as planning is concerned today, retirement planning, and that is the effects of market volatility on a liquidating asset. We're liquidating our assets, we're withdrawing in retirement. That's why we have our nest egg. We want our investments to replace our income. So how does market volatility affect that scenario? So here we're going to show 2 different columns. We have the S&P 500. We're just going to stick $1 million into the S&P 500. We're going to do the 4% rule this time. We're going to take out 40,000, not 50,000 like in the previous example. Now, the S&P 500 is not an actively managed fund. It's just following the S&P 500. So it's a very, very, very small 0.04% fee because there's no active management going on. And then we're going to do XYZ. XYZ is a bogus fund. It doesn't exist. Just something I created to explain a concept.
For comparison.
This is just strictly conceptually speaking here. Going to have the same $1 million, going to have the same 4% withdrawal. Now, XYZ is actively managed, so there's a 1% fee attached. Okay. So notice it's 25 times more expensive. It's far more expensive than the S&P 500, 0.04% compared to 1%. Got it?
Got it.
All right. So let's see what happens here. So here we have the year 2001 to 2020. And here's the S&P 500, and it averaged 6.92%, which, again, if you're listening to talking heads and they keep saying, well, the market averages 10 to 12%, it doesn't.
So these are the actual averages.
These are the actual annual returns from the year 2001 to 2020, 6.92%.
Wow.
And here's XYZ performance. It did 5.94%. So it's an entire 1% less. It's 6. Well, I mean, not exactly. It's 0.98%, but I mean, come on, let's round up.
Okay.
6.92 compared to 5.94. This one is underperforming by an entire percent, and this one's 25 times more expensive. You want to place a wager on which one's going to perform better?
Well, S&P, but that's also changed over time too.
Well, let's see. Here we have our $1 million. We're taking out $440,000.
Okay.
Our account is down to $800,000. This right here should blow the idea of the constant rate of return theory out of the water. We've had 20 years of returns. We've averaged 7%. We've taken out 4%, and we're still net negative. If you had any belief whatsoever that the constant rate of return theory holds water, this should just throw it away completely and totally. Okay, let's see what XYZ does. Again, 25 times more expensive, an entire percent less on the average. We're starting with our $1 million, and at the end, we're over $1 million. Now, how does that make sense?
Well, like you said, you can't just go off the average. And the first thing I'm noticing is 2001 and 2, you had -13, -23. Just in your previous example, here you're almost down to 600,000. So you're at 60% in just 2 years, whereas you're at 80%. And after 2 years, you lose 10%. 3%.
You're noticing some good things now, but let's go back to the idea of averages. This thing maxed out as a return at 13.98. It only touched 13% 1, 2, 3 times. How many times did the S&P 500 touch 13% or higher? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times. This thing touched or exceeded, sometimes even doubled, over doubled, 13%. This did it 7 times. This only did it 3 times. So you would think from a growth standpoint, the S&P 500 makes a heck of a lot more sense because our growth patterns are significantly higher and our overall growth rate is significantly better. But we're not talking about accumulation anymore. We're talking about distribution. Why in the world is there such a huge gap? 800,000 to $1 million there, $200,000 gap. It's this last little bit here, standard deviation. Standard deviation is a measurement of volatility. The higher the volatility, the higher standard deviation, the higher volatility. So basically, XYZ, it's volatile, it's going up and down, but it's going up and down like this. The S&P 500 is going up and down like this.
Yeah, now you're talking statistics when you talk about standard deviation. But
Yep.
It makes sense because the bigger the losses, the more of a percentage it takes to come back from that. And that's what you explained prior.
Yep.
So the smaller the deviation, you don't have to come back nearly as much.
Yeah. I mean, you're not growing as bad. You're not growing as good. Your growth patterns are smaller, but your loss patterns are also smaller. And so from a liquidation standpoint, you're in a better position. Now, some people see all this and they're like, numbers. My wife is one of these people. She looks at this. And her mind just checks out. So what I did is I created a graph here to show the difference. The blue is the S&P 500,
Yeah.
pardon me, and the green is XYZ. Now remember, we're taking withdrawals here. If we weren't taking withdrawals, the S&P would absolutely outperform XYZ. But we're talking about income situations, not growth situations. And because of that, you notice this dotted line, that's the linear progression. The average linear progression of the S&P went down, where the average linear progression of XYZ, it increased, not by much. It didn't increase fantastically well, but it did have an increase.
So how much are they taking? I didn't see in the chart that they were taking anything out.
Yeah. In both cases, we were taking out $40,000.
Oh, 4%.
4% in both cases, and there were fees. We also took fees into account. Remember, this fee was 25 times more expensive.
Right.
So even though this is 25 times more expensive and it underperformed, it was still the better position from a liquidation standpoint. Absolutely not from a growth standpoint, but it is a better position to take from a liquidation standpoint. And that's where people don't quite understand. They think, well, but the averages are, if I'm averaging good, I should be able to pull out more. Hold on there, buddy. It's not just about the averages. What's the volatility? We have to take volatility into account.
Yeah.
And then we have to figure out, are we in an up market or a down market? What are we going to do here? So, yeah. So where does that leave us? Well, retirement income planning, I hope that people understand now that it is critically different from wealth accumulation. They are not the same. They are different. They're similar, and we can use the same tools even. We're going to use stocks, bonds, mutual funds, annuities, blah, 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 to grow our funds. We're going to use stocks, bonds, mutual funds, annuities, blah, 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 to distribute our funds. We're not changing the tools, but we are changing the way we use them.
So is this why, especially when people are retiring, guaranteed annuities can be very, very valuable to protect assets and ensure consistent income?
Yes, annuities are very powerful tools for income purposes because you're guaranteed never to lose your paycheck. That will always come to you. Now, do I think that they're God's gift to mankind and everybody should rush out and buy annuities en masse? No, absolutely not. There are plenty of pitfalls with annuities. There are a lot of things, there are tons of gotchas, and you have to be very careful with them. And you shouldn't put all your money into them. However, neither should you be running in the opposite direction saying, I hate everything about them and I'm never going to do them. No, they have a place. They're very important. But you need to make certain that you talk to somebody who understands how they work and what the pitfalls are. Because another topic of discussion is there are actually 4 different kinds of annuities, 4 different types, and they all have their own unique pros and cons. And if you get the right one, you're good. If you get the wrong one, you're in a bad place.
So, quick question: how does this planning and how much do you take into account changing tax strategies? I know a lot of people are referring people and suggesting Roth IRAs if tax rates go up, and are pushing those generally right now.
So when tax comes into the conversation, first of all, I like to speak with people's CPAs, make certain, or if they don't have a CPA, their accountant, to make certain that they're on board, because I'm not a tax professional. I'm a financial professional.
Right.
And a lot of people think that accountants can give investment advice and that advisors can give tax advice. They're actually 2 separate parts of finance that they're not the same. They require different sets of licensing. A lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah.
So I want to make certain that an accountant or a CPA is involved in the conversation to make certain that that side of the conversation is properly represented. However, what I like to point out to my clients is taxes haven't been lower. Our current tax positions are really, really low when you look at historical tax rates.
Yeah.
And our debt and deficit is higher than it's ever been. I have no control over Washington. Neither do you. We have no idea exactly what's going to happen, when's going to happen, how's it going to happen. But if you just take a look at those 2 ideas, that taxes are historically low and spending is historically high, common sense would lead us to believe we're probably going to have taxes go up. And if taxes go up, putting your money from a traditional IRA, SEP, simple 401k, whatever, and putting it into a Roth situation, while it's never fun to have that taxable event, going from the traditional to the Roth, it creates a taxable event. However, once you're in the Roth, you're in a tax-free zone. It's very nice not having to worry about taxes. Whenever I'm having conversations with my clients, and I'd let them know, congratulations, we can give you, we can create $100,000 a year for the rest of your life. We're fine. When people say, how does that affect my taxes? And they're in traditional, it's like, well, yeah, you got the 100,000, but you don't get the 100,000 because Uncle Sam gets his part. But when I'm talking to people that have all the money in Roth, and I say you get 100,000, they're like, cool, I get 100,000. End of story. I don't have to worry about all that stuff. So,
And so, just want to highlight here that this is why you have a financial team, Stephen Mehr. I mean, this is great information. I did not know most of this stuff. So again, reach out to him. But he mentions a tax advisor. That is not what we do here at Guardian Tax Law. We do no financial or tax advisors, people that do tax planning and strategies. A lot of CPAs will do that.
yes.
That is a separate expertise in itself. But when you get a team around you, it doesn't have to break the bank, but you
Nope.
can get good advice for you and moving forward. Stephen, how do
Can I just
people
put a
reach out
point
to you?
into that real quick?
Sure, of course.
What people don't understand, they look at building a team as an expense. You've got to understand that the team that you build, if you build the right team, the amount that you're giving up in expenses are pennies on the dollar to what you're going to get in return. Your financial position is going to improve so dramatically well that yes, you have to pay for CPA, yes, you have to pay for a tax attorney, yes, you have to pay for a financial advisor, because we need to put food on our tables. We don't do this for free, right? Yes, you need to pay us, but what we're going to get you in return is huge.
Far outweighs.
Far outweighs.
And I can't tell you how many people run out of funds. And we were just talking earlier before the show about how Social Security is looking at a 21% haircut as soon as 2033.
2033. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't
So
that fun? Isn't that special?
9 years. And the way we're going with our spending, it'll probably be sooner than that. So
It's entirely
got a
possible.
plan. Got to plan sooner, and the sooner you start, the better it is. Stephen, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can call me. Give me a second here. I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'll just put it up on a. Let me.
Well, he does that. Again, if you have any questions or we can connect you with Stephen and other financial advisors, you can always reach out to us at Guardian Tax Law 520-485-7371 or guardiantaxlaw.com. This show will be posted on our YouTube channel and it will be linked as well. And here is Stephen's information.
Okay. So you can go to libraadvisors.com. This is my website. There's Mount Everest. I kind of like Mount Everest. Some of the things that I do to help people. There's me. And if you come to the contact us button, or you can see the phone number here, address, contact us directly, give us your name and your email here. How did you find us? How can we help? Click submit. And you can either come to the contact page, you can call the phone number.
Can you read out the phone number for those that can't see it if we're going too
Sure.
fast?
Yeah. 520-314-7753.
Perfect. Now, I want to thank Stephen
Right
for coming
there.
on. A lot of great information. Again, this is why we have people that are experts in different areas. I just had someone, and we put out that we'll connect people with financial planners or CPAs across the country. And I had someone just the other day call me and say, "Look, I need a CPA. I'm in Boulder, Colorado." Within 5 to 10 minutes, having a conversation, we were able to refer them to the right professional because they actually didn't need a CPA. And Stephen is one of the great professionals that we love to refer to. If you have any questions, you can watch the show. It'll be broadcast twice, and then we're also going to post it to our website at guardiantaxlaw.com. Have a great day, and thank you, Stephen.
Take care.